Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of that thing we call Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Twitter like we are each and every single Wednesday at about 5:30 or thereabouts. We have plenty of comments coming in already. And of course, that is the best way to interact with the show is watching it live, whether you're on YouTube or Twitter. And of course, if you do watch on YouTube, all of your questions, your comments, your concerns, everything all come in real time, and the chat is already filling up. But we do have to mention, if you can't watch us live, it is all good. You can watch the broadcast as soon as it's over, or you can listen to the audio version of this show starting tomorrow morning, all courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network. I did not screw it up.
Got it right.
John Saponaro out in Los Angeles, California. My co-host who is matching me very much today, back in New Jersey. We did not plan this, but one of us is going to have to change during the break. Matt Ibby Ibanez. Ibby, lots of stuff to get to with our Mets, but how you feeling?
I think John, I'm doing okay. Like I said, I always have fun when we hit record, but days like this, it's like I said in the chat to start, it's going to be a doozy of a day. But I think we wore the same thing because we're both feeling very funeral-esque as we're all wearing all black with a theme here. And clearly, everyone who watches the show knows that I drink out of the same cup every week. And we know that building character since 1962 is clearly a theme for this team. And it's building a lot of character, not only over the last couple of weeks, but really, since the last time we hit record, especially. But yeah, let's do this.
Shay nailed it right as you said it. Is this your funeral outfits, John and Ibby? So you guys are sharing a brain on that.
Rael did say something a couple days ago. I was like, I might have to bring out a black suit with the way they're playing. But clearly, we're wearing all black, and it's perfect. It's proper, I should say.
Stevie Mack saying, hit the like button or else you'll be banned for using illegal sticky substances. Fair. Then we've got Keith Blacknick saying, do we get Sap Licata today? Both of you change, put some blue caps on because the black jerseys are a curse. So we know how Keith feels about the black jerseys.
We know how Keith feels, yeah.
Ibby, we've got a great guest today.
We do.
We have a lot of stuff to talk about because there is a ton of stuff. There is no way this is real.
That is not Frank. There is no way that's the real Frank.
There is no way that is Frank the Tank.
That is Frank the Tank.
Somebody has created.
No way.
There is no shot that is the real Frank the Tank. Absolutely not. I'm going to need some kind of proof that is Frank. And I don't know if we can provide it. I don't know
if we can prove that that's really
during the show. We're going to have to figure it out towards the end. Matt Williams, guest on the show.
Oh, I love it. What's up, Matt?
Says, I think last year was part of a long con by Buck Showalter to drive us all insane. Last night's Guillorme explanation clinches it. We are going to get to all of that. But let's bring in our guest this week.
Yes.
Because we've been looking forward to talking to this guy for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got some strong opinions as well. People follow him on Twitter, I am sure. It is Carson from Mets Weekly and the Mets Weekly podcast. Carson, how you doing, man?
What's up, Carson?
I'm doing good as best as I can watching this team. And, I mean, become a chore, but always here to talk about it and rant about it.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to start. Look, everybody live in the chat saying there's no way that's not the real Frank. That's Aunt Rivera, Subway to Shay. Rael saying Frank selfie or it isn't real. James Dowling, not the real Frank. Absolutely. Look, I think this comment sums it up from Joe K. And Carson, I'm going to come to you first because you're our guest. I thought last week was rock bottom, and I think the only thing missing from that is ... right? Because the Mets are down bad right now. The Mets are 5 games under 500. That is a season low. They are 31-36. They do not look good at the moment. And I'm not really sure what the Mets can do right now. They don't have a lot of ways to go. They seem rock in a hard place. So what's your feelings on just where this season has gotten to?
Where the fuck do I start? Okay. I mean, our last podcast episode for Mets Weekly was an all-time low. That was the podcast episode name. I hope it doesn't go lower than it's actually going, but they continue to lose and they continue to piss me off. But I can tell you right now, it's just a circus of errors. I mean, it's just, you constantly just don't get to see everything put together every single night. And that's the reason why you are seeing them consistently lose and find crazy ways to lose. I mean, I'm looking at this team, even though the offense has been better, I still don't like it. I don't like the approach that they have. I think it's outdated and made for 100 years ago. I also, now you're seeing, defensive blunders as well. You have a pitching staff of AARP members, who, have, fallen and can't get up past 4 innings. And, you look at it and it's just tons of pieces of frustration every single night. And that's something that I can't, it's really hard to watch, but every single day you get up and you're like, well, let's see the lineup. What are we going to do? So much excitement every single day, and you hope they can turn it around, but it has not been fun to watch whatsoever.
Well, that's the thing, and I'll throw this to you now. Ant Rivera saying there is no rock bottom. We know this. The bottom always drops out. And, look, it's bleak. It is bleak right now. And Ant is a positive fan. We got a lot of positive fans in this chat and everything, but everybody feels the same way. It is appropriate that you and I are wearing all black. So, I mean, what can be said about the way this has gone right now?
It's hard to really put it into words. I was just saying to Carson off air, after every episode or after every game, in our Facebook community, I always do like breakdowns of every game. I take pride in breaking everything down and talking about it. And like the last 2 weeks, it's been such a chore. Another word that's been used a lot. It's been a chore to do this because I don't have much to say. And there's only so much negative. And sometimes I try to pull out what was good about the games, but there hasn't been much to pull out. And to Carson's point before, what he was just saying, and I echo it, when we ended last week's episode and you said, what's your final thought? Like, what do you want to get out of here on? And I said, I hope that when we hit record next week, that we finally get what I've been asking for and what a lot of Mets fans have been asking for, and that was a complete game over a couple of games. Give me something where I get the pitching, where I get the offense, where I get the bullpen, not one, not two, not one here, not two. Like, I want everything. I know, and I prefaced it by saying, I know I'm asking for a lot with how this team is going, but they've gone lower. It got worse since last week.
You're 100%
which is
right.
Incredible to me. And it's like, I don't know what to even pull and to say. And I said to Ant on Twitter before, I said, like, this is going to be a very cathartic episode of just like letting frustrations out. Like we always say, this is a therapy session for the show. It's just like, I don't know what to say, but I'm going to eventually get my thoughts proper. And as the topics continue, I'll get everything out. But it's hard to really put a finger on what the main problem is, because I think it's just everything.
It is. I mean, look, it's in the comments. Chris saying, I can't be positive anymore. Keith saying, Chris, I could be positive that this team can get worse. I mean, that is the sentiment. And, Keith, he's always got a penchant for those, those kind of one-liners. But I think he's right in this case. And I know he's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it kind of echoes what Ant said before, where, the bottom always tends to drop out. And look, you said, can we get a complete effort? And Carson, to his point, it's been worse. I think the Mets have played the worst baseball of the season from a starting pitching, bullpen, offense, defensive perspective in the last week. Guys who don't make misplays have made misplays with Lindor and Nimmo, who's made himself into a very, very, very good center fielder. I don't know where else it can go and how else it can get worse, but I know where it starts. That much I absolutely know. Carson, it starts right here with the starting pitching. That is Max Scherzer's numbers from last night against the Yankees. 3.1 innings pitched, 3 1/3, 7 hits, 6 earned runs. No walks, I guess that's good. No strikeouts. I mean, look, I am not one, Carson, who's going to sit here right now today and say that Max Scherzer is washed. I'm not ready to say that yet. Other people are going to disagree with me, and that is their right. But what I am going to say is that he needs to be better. I don't care if he's 70% of what he used to be, 85%, 40%. These numbers, Carson, that is not 40% of Hall of Fame Max Scherzer. No. That's worse. That is worse than replacement level. So how do you feel about Max? Do you think he's washed? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What's your standpoint on this guy?
I don't think he's washed, but I think that he is starting to really, really get on my nerves in terms of the expectation that we had from Max Scherzer. And we've talked about this a lot on Mets Weekly of how a lot of these excuses, a lot of these ways that he's carrying himself have really rubbed off really bad on all of us Mets fans, or a majority of Mets fans, because he is just, for the fierce competitor and all-time great that I've been told that he is, I haven't really been able to see it. Then he kind of silenced it a little bit, and he started pitching a little bit well, and then these back-to-back ones have just been a little bit rough. So it's just been one of those roller coaster things where you should not expect that from a $43 million ace. You just can't expect that. And it comes to a point where it's the middle of June, and all you can say is you have to be better or it's going to be a bigger problem. And it continues to be a bigger problem. And it's $43 million. Like, when I'm hearing, all throughout this year, and this is pretty much water on the bridge at this point, but the stuff of him talking about the pitch clock and him talking about the sticky stuff and all of this stuff. I mean, I'm disappointed. I thought that Max Scherzer was going to be a little bit more carry himself and do this a little bit better than I thought he would. But once you put the Mets jersey on, I guess, you got to join the clown show, or you fade into the abyss, I guess. Yeah, it's just abyss. I don't know.
John, your mic.
I think he's muted.
I think I was muted there for a second. I apologize. Yeah. I was saying Shay said it right as Carson was saying it. It's crazy that a pitch clock has defeated Max Scherzer. Keith saying, I think Scherzer has some kind of injury and is trying to play through it. And both of those things are possible. Look, I don't think we have enough data. I think the pitch clock is too new to know whether or not it is affecting these guys and how it is affecting these guys. Course, yeah. But it seems like there is something to that. And I'm not trying to make excuses, whether it's Max or Verlander or even a guy like Sandy Alcantara. Like, I'm not trying to make excuses for any of these guys, but Ant Rivera says it great. Unacceptable from Max. I was there. You don't know how many 0-2 counts he had and couldn't finish off the batters. And it's the Yankees B squad, for goodness sakes. I mean, that sums it up.
The lineup that they're running out there is absolutely pathetic. And then I'm watching Max, watching that game yesterday. He's just, and that's right, couldn't finish anybody. He's floating sliders and they're ripping them. And I was like, as it came after hit, I'm like, he's not going to get out of this inning. He can't get anybody out. He wasn't going to finish anybody off. And to continue the onslaught, if you will, of data or stats, Michael Mayer saying it best. I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and it continues to be the point. Last year, gave up 13 home runs in 145 innings pitched. This year, he's given up 10 home runs in 57 innings pitched. So something, whether you want to equate it to the pitch clock or old age or whatever it may be, something's not right. Things are hanging too much, doesn't have as much bite. Velocity's down a little bit. Numbers were down last night as well. So, all these things are adding up, and it's leading to a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And Patty throws this out to piggyback off of what you just said with the home run stats. His ERA was 2.29 last year. Now it's 4.45. And it brings you to the question that you have to ask, which I don't necessarily want to, but Douglas Barnes, yeah, Max's injury is old age, and David agreeing. And look, Carson, it is possible, right? Nobody can pitch forever. Nobody can be elite forever. Exactly. Father Time always wins out. And you can argue with the fact that the Mets invested a lot in two guys. But what I've said on this show is that you cannot fault the thought process. The Mets didn't want to give up any of their young position players. I understand that. I think they made the right choice there. I think we're seeing that. The Mets also, with their new owner, he wanted to make a splash for the sake of saying, hey, I'm not the Wilpons. Steve Cohen was there as a minority owner for the Wilpons. He saw the ire. He saw the not spending. He knows he's coming in as the richest guy in the game, and he's got to spend a little bit. But even from a baseball perspective, it makes a ton of sense. When you lose DeGrom and you go out and you pay Justin Verlander, who had the lowest ERA of his career, won a World Series, won a third Cy Young, he led the AL in a bunch of stats, he led Major League Baseball in a bunch of stats. You don't look at this guy and say, I know he's 40, he's probably washed, don't pay him. So the thought process is sound, but are they just too old at this point?
I mean, I think this entire team is too old. I mean, just overall, but just going into Verlander, we just talked about, I mean, we literally just talked about this, how I'm not surprised that he's kind of fallen off like this. And I'm kind of not surprised that he's, not been able to repeat that dominance that he had last year because he's 40 years old. He's 40. Yeah. He's 40 years old. It's going to be either he gets on a groove or he doesn't. And it's something that we preach a lot on our show, is how these older guys, when you sign them, they're not going to get any better as time goes on. So, I mean, the thing about Verlander is that, we talked about how they brought him in to kind of replace Jacob deGrom. The problem is, in my opinion, the talent level, whatever you get from Jacob deGrom. And obviously, I personally wanted to bring him back. I wanted to bring back Jacob deGrom. I was willing to match that five-year offer that they did. Call me crazy now because he's getting Tommy John surgery now. I was wrong about that. I'll 100% own up to it. But the problem is that they tried to replace Jacob deGrom by giving someone Jacob deGrom money when Jacob deGrom's not replaceable. And that's how it looks to me. And when they did get Justin Verlander, I was like, okay, he's good, but he's not deGrom. He's not deGrom. And like, no one is. And now you're probably not even going to see deGrom. You'll never see somebody like that for a while. Mm-hmm. So I personally believe, and this is obviously water under the bridge, you can't change it. I think that they should have just filled the rotation with more guys who are durable, younger arms that you could add into this rotation. They didn't have to go all for Rodon, obviously. Rodon's hurt as well. But that was one thing that I really wanted to see them do, was make this rotation younger, and they didn't do it. So that's just something that really pisses me off. And then, I understand you want to replace an ace with an ace, and that being Justin Verlander, who just won the Cy Young, top caliber, has one of the greatest pitching careers ever. But it just didn't seem like there was anybody out there that could have replaced the caliber of Jacob deGrom. And it's starting to come true. And the fact that they replaced that with a 40-year-old is just very, I speculate over it a lot. And now it's just getting even worse.
Well, Keith says old age, sure, but talent doesn't fall off a cliff like that, right? And I think that's what everybody was banking on. But we have seen it before. I don't want to be, talking out of both sides of my mouth here, but I do want to kind of address it fairly, right? Ant Rivera, he's been steadfast on this. I wanted to keep Bassett. That's something he said. Bassett was very durable. Bassett was at times one of the best, the best starter on the team.
He's a bullpen saver.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Mets completely need that right now. But where I will sort of disagree, Carson, with you a bit is the fact that I didn't expect Verlander to come here and give us a 1.75 ERA. But I also didn't expect him and Max to be here giving us 3 and 4 innings on a nightly basis. Eddie, you talk about, being an innings eater. Now, look, you're not paying those guys $43 million each to be innings eaters. But I thought, look, you give Max a 4-run lead like they have, it seems, every time the last 3 or 4 times out.
Hold it.
Max can hold a 4-run lead for 6 innings, right? He's Max Scherzer. He's not going to come out and get bombed immediately afterward. And to me, that is the most damning part of this. Again, when you look at the numbers, and I'll bring them back up, that's not Max Scherzer operating at 50% of what he was. That's Max Scherzer being not a major league pitcher. If I replace that picture of him with somebody like, Jose Butto or David Peterson, you'd go, okay, fine, I can see that. You don't see that out of Max Scherzer. And that's the thing that drives me nuts.
Yeah, it's that. And then just to piggyback off of some of the things that Carson was saying before, it's like the process that can definitely come into question when it comes to the starting rotation, how it was built and things like that. Like we talked about on the show here, how, even if, to your point also, John, even if Verlander came in and pitched to a 3.32 ERA and won 15 games. Like if you did that in comparison to the team basically being brought back as what it was, you're like, well, that's giving me a lot more than what Jake gave me last year.
Absolutely.
So you're thinking, okay, maybe it can just carry over. Maybe they have a little more juice. They can get it going again. Like, but to your point, like, I think Verlander was the focus and everything because ace for ace, yes, but also because there wasn't that many options out there. But the one thing I will say, and why a lot of people have been bringing up, and I agree with them on this, there were options out there that they basically were like, no thanks. And it's really coming back to bite them now when you watch and you see what other guys are doing. When you, like, I know we're talking starters right now, but when you look at the pen and you're like, nah, I don't want Andrew Chafin. And then now Andrew Chafin's having a really good year in Arizona. You're like, I don't. Zach Eflin, no thanks. Zach Eflin's killing it in Tampa Bay right now. I know Tampa is a pitching factory, but still, Zach Eflin, 30 years old, killing it for them. So, like, there were guys out there that you could have brought in to add some depth to the rotation, to the pen. You opted not to because you wanted to put more of a trust, if you will, in your depth in terms of McGill and Peterson, and you bring in and Verlander, and you roll the dice on Senga, so that means you let Bassett go. So it's like you went certain ways, and it's a common theme here. A lot of things that they chose to do, as well as how they're playing now, nothing's working.
Yeah, I think that's the critique you could give them because, Carson, this is something we've talked about over the last couple of weeks on this show with respect to, look, just because sometimes the outcome isn't what you want, it doesn't mean the decision-making was bad, right? And I'll jump into one of the comments to kind of, I don't know, prove my point, if you will. Rail said, Cohen made a 3 to 5 year commitment, great for selling tickets, not so great for building a sustainable team. Now, I would argue that you can build sustainability as long as those deals are short-term, high AAV, like they were with a lot of these guys. But when you look at what they built and how they built it, it was incredibly top-heavy. Ibby mentioned Zach Eflin a moment ago, and I made a comment. I was like, you want Zach Eflin to replace Jacob deGrom? No, Mets Twitter would have exploded. But if they would have gone out and gotten Verlander and then also signed some other people to some deals where you say, hey, look, we're bringing this guy in. We're not sure what he's going to give us, but, we think we're maxed out at the bullpen. We have some young guys we like, but we're going to bring in Andrew Chafin anyway. To me, and Matt Williams said this on our show a couple weeks ago, that's where Steve Cohen's money can really be used effectively. It's not only with the superstar splashy deal, it's with the other deals that fill out the roster. You want to give a guy $10 million to be a bench player because he's one of the best bench players in baseball and somebody else is going to offer him 8, give him 2 more and solidify your team throughout the 26-man roster. The Mets right now have a very top-heavy roster, and that's why when Pete doesn't hit and Lindor doesn't hit and these two guys don't pitch and Edwin Diaz gets hurt, they don't win baseball games.
Yeah. Simple as that.
Yeah.
I mean, the math is right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we saw it last year. Like that was the recipe for this team when it came to winning because the names that you mentioned, sprinkle in Nimmo, sprinkle in McNeil, like that's what allowed the offense to go. That's what allowed the pitching to go. Like everything was clicking. And when it doesn't, and it shows that this team is down bad, like I said, listless baseball it's hard to watch. And you're sitting there, and let's be honest with ourselves here. And we like being honest and out in front. They had that lead yesterday. Were you confident watching that game?
No.
Because I wasn't.
No.
I wasn't confident at all.
I actually thought they were going to lose by more.
I wasn't confident. I was like, they're gonna give this lead up. They will. And then when the bases were loaded in the 8th, and we can talk about that if we want to, I was like, I don't feel good right now. And I defend Lindor on this show. I do. But at the same time, like I get so, it's bad because I get so much anxiety sitting there watching him as he's at the plate, especially from the left side lately. I get so much anxiety because I know that when he's down, and I also know that I'm going to stay off my phone because I know exactly what the talking points, what the headlines are going to be. And I'm sorry, if there's one thing I will say, and if people want to call me an apologist for him, it's whatever, but this team is not where it is because of Francisco Lindor. There are a bunch of other things. Does he need to play better right now? Absolutely, 100%. I'm not saying that like that's proper, but to think that he is the sole reason, like a lot of people do and want to jump on him, that is incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, Carson, they said it on the broadcast last night. Obviously, he failed to get the runner in from third, which would have tied the game with less than 2 outs, which for a superstar player like Lindor should be automatic. But you can't ignore the fact that he has one of the few grand slams the Mets have this year. He was 4 for 4 with the bases loaded heading into that at bat. And his numbers with the bases loaded, his batting average is like 57 points higher than his overall batting average. So look, you're not going to succeed every time. And I even said this to Wardy, who's been a guest on this show and has great Mets content in his own right. He said, awful at bat by Lindor. And I said, look, you got to get that. Oh, excuse me. He said, awful at bat by Marte. And I said, Marte's at bat, 2 outs, working it to 3-2. He missed the hittable pitch, fouled it back, but he swung at some absolutely dirty sliders that would have gotten anybody to end that inning. If you want to take umbrage with anybody, and I love Lindor, you have to take umbrage with Lindor because he is the guy who was up there with less than 2 outs where a ball in play ties the game. The only thing you can't do is strike out. And I know people are going to say hit into a double play, Carson, but yeah, if you hit the ball hard and you hit into a double play, that sucks, right? Yeah. If you strike out, you simply cannot do that. And so, to me, when you look at where this team is, and somebody just said it, I'll try to find it in the comments, everything that can go wrong is going wrong. Right down to the situation with Drew Smith, because we have to move on from talking about the stuff we're talking about. So I'm going to play a quick video, get some reaction from the chat, and then Carson will come to you first on what you thought about last night's debacle with Drew Smith.
I don't think they were sticky. Yeah. I mean, obviously they do. I'm sure they're going to come out with a statement saying something similar to Max's, like stickiest hands ever or whatnot. But my hands weren't sticky, and I had everybody check them as I was coming off the field. I don't know if that was caught on camera. The MLB guy in the tunnel, I kind of forced him to feel my hands as I walked in. I just grabbed him like this and pulled, and he actually laughed and said there was nothing there. So I don't really know what else to do.
I mean, that says it all. That video courtesy of SNY, of course, that was from last night's post game. But I mean, Carson, they interviewed Bill Miller, who rejected him, and he said, I don't know what it was. It just felt sticky. And that is a travesty. And I would be saying that if it happened to the Toronto Blue Jays or the Anaheim Angels or whomever, but it didn't. It happened to the Mets.
Okay, I will keep it as far away from Drew Smith, who I so despise, but it just seems like an umpire just abusing their power. Or they're just basically they know that there's way too many rules going on in this game, and they're just kind of responding like reactionary to it. They see something that's sticky and they're like, oh, gone, you're done. And, we have to handle this because there's so many rules that are coming in here of, the pitch clock and the pickoff attempts and everything. The thing is that I don't, and this is a problem that I've talked about for a long time, is I don't see this era of baseball, this 2023 baseball with all of these rules. I don't see how it can be ran by a human being at this point, because there's so many things that need to like be operated for this game to go fluently and to go as fast as it needed to be. And I feel like we're starting to see the need for umpires just going steadily down, like even more than ever. I mean, we see a blown call, whatever, it happens, human element. Too close to take, there's framing, whatever. But at this point, it just sounded like, you can't really rely on an umpire or a specific umpire. I don't know who this umpire is, so, courtesy to him, because usually if you know an umpire's name, they suck. Yeah. But I mean, at this point, I don't even know how to explain it, because I mean, he said that there's nothing there. Do I want to call Drew Smith a liar? Sure. Why not? But Am I somewhat happy I don't have to see him for 10 games? Yeah, but we lose a roster spot, which sucks. But overall, I mean, it's something that I don't know. It's very weird and it's very fragile. You'll never really understand what's going on in these umpires' minds, and I'm not sympathizing with them whatsoever. It's just I feel like you have a little too many regulations now for something to actually just like run completely smoothly.
That's a fair point. Keith Hernandez says that a lot throughout the broadcast, where there's a lot for the umpires and the hitters and the pitchers to think about nowadays. Jump back into the comments really quick. Aunt Rivera agreeing with you, Carson. I'm sorry, but Drew Smith is overrated to me, which is fair. That's a great opinion.
Gasp! Don't do it.
It's totally. Listen to me. That's a totally great opinion to have. To me, it's not about the pitcher. It's about what happened, more so than anything else. Keith Blacknick saying, "Get that device from Bar Rescue from behind the bar that can tell if your hands are clean." Stevie Mack with a sore spot saying, "Shiny ears are still okay though." So Ibby, I made some similar comments last night on Twitter when I said, you set off a random alarm at the airport going through TSA. They swab your hands. It takes 10 seconds in a machine. Now, look, I'm no engineer. I'm no scientist. I'm not saying it's that simple, but I don't think, to Carson's point, it should be as subjective as it is. For 150 years, baseball dealt in complete objectivity, fair or foul, safe or out, ball or strike. And now you have, even with the pitch clock, and some people love it, some people hate it, it is unforgiving, right? There's a little tap on the umpire's wrist, like a little haptic. If the guys aren't ready, if it's the batter, if it's the pitcher, there's no excuses. There's no nothing. Hey, it's a ball. Hey, it's a strike. Hey, that's it. It's objective. It's emotionless. It is completely up to the robots. But this thing with the sticky stuff, where do you get off, Ibby? Like, how do you quantify it being too sticky, not sticky enough? It's rosin. It's not the right rosin. It's this, it's that. It's hot out. They said it on the post game. Tadzio was like, this is the hottest game the Mets have played at home all season. Maybe he's sweating more. Maybe that makes it stickier. When Max got thrown out, it was the hottest game. I was at that game here at Dodger Stadium. It was the hottest game at Dodger Stadium to that point. Maybe that plays a factor. I mean, why can't the MLB get their head out of their asses with regards to this rule? I don't care. The guys can spin the friggin' baseball like a DJ for all I care. That is better. I'd rather have guys with RPMs that are through the roof on their breaking balls. That's better than guys getting thrown out because they're like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, throw them out.
Like you said it best. The subjectivity of the entire thing is it's too wide open to just say it's based off of one person's opinion. And then at the same time, I think it also comes into this whole, like, I think people have a hard time when it comes to groupthink. So when you are a part of a crew and one guy says, ooh, you're really sticky. Hey, Joe, come over here. And then Joe comes over and he feels, he's like, oh, he says it was sticky. So it's like, yes, it's pretty sticky. Hey, why don't you come over here, Tony? And then he feels it. And then like everyone's just like, yep. It's almost as if no one's going to throw the other guy on the bus where it's going to be like 3 against 1 saying, no, you're wrong here. Like, he's completely fine. Like, I think group thought kind of comes into it as well. But again, it comes down to that subjectivity. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. The rule, it's been a problem. It's happened twice to the Mets so far. It's been an issue. But you said, John, why does Major League Baseball have to have their head up their ass? Well, they've thought that their ass was a hat for a long time now. So it doesn't, like, it's never going to change until Rob Manfred decides to change something. And we all know how he is when it comes to change and doing things properly. He doesn't fucking do it. So we're going to have to deal with this. And I've said this multiple times on the show. When it comes to the umpires, as we continue to trek towards them eventually being out of the game because they're going to go the robo route, it's almost as if the umps have gotten together and saying, look, if they're getting rid of us, we're really going to muck up this game and show them how shitty we can really be. Because if I believe the stats from the Twitter umpire account, the auditor account that follows everything, last night's ump was like 85%. He missed like 25 calls, one of the worst showings of the year so far. So it just keeps on getting worse and worse.
Yeah, this is a good comment. There's two actually from James Dowling, and this goes along with what you're saying, Carson. MLB made everything go at once, and what he means by that is, the MLB should have went slower with the rules instead of all at once, making it too much for the umpires. And I think that's where, like you said, you don't want it to be misconstrued that you're sympathizing with these guys out there, but it is a lot, and it's a lot real quick. And I know not all these rules became official all in the same season, but it's been back to back to back to back to back. Whereas some of these guys have been officiating for years and years and years. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, everything's different. Everything's different now.
Yeah, I think at this point, you just have so many regulations that have just come in so quickly. And I mean, I don't like to sympathize with umpires because there has been some that have pissed me off. And I think that, we've talked about and like what you just said, John, with, we said with, it's ball or strike, safe or out, the technology now and the social media, the amount of heat that these umpires get. I mean, that's the new environment that it is. And that's probably the reason why it's become a little bit more of a problem as to where people are going to go after you because there's tons of eyes watching you. And even though it's been tough to expand the game of baseball, these controversial stuff, that's the thing that has really been something that, a lot of, fans have kind of gone to of, the ump, they're paying them off. They're doing this, they're doing that. I mean, it gets everyone talking and it heats everyone up. And eventually, Rob Manfred says, well, we need something new. We need something this. We need something that. We need to change this. We change that. I've talked about, the rules from both sides, from pitchers and hitters and everything. And I've talked about how much people are going to hate being a Mets fan. And that's a different story with these new rules because of, age and shift and everything. I mean, I could break that down for hours, but I mean, at this point, I think there's just too much. I think there's a lot. And, even though I'm not someone who's like, oh, I need sticky stuff. I need sticky stuff because I want these guys throwing hard. I need these guys with incredible spin rates, even though, I mean, I love those nasty pitchers, obviously. Don't have many of them on this team. But at this point, you got to pick some kind of, there's got to be some kind of medium they got to find. And I think that if they are going to suspend guys for the sticky stuff where they're not even going to listen to what they have to say or any appeal whatsoever, and it's an automatic sticky stuff ban, Drew Smith's been using it all year. Bye.
I will say, it's definitely, when you want to talk about rules and you want to talk about inconsistency, the fact that other guys, including Max Scherzer, including Domingo Germán, were allowed to go wash their hands after pitching in the game and being deemed too sticky. Drew Smith comes out of the bullpen, doesn't throw a pitch, and they're like, no, you're out. He can't wash his hands, can't rinse them off, can't get him a towel. To me, that's the kind of thing that is absolutely insane. And, Ibby, when you look at some of the comments coming in, I think this really encapsulates everything we're talking about. It's a larger issue than the Mets, and we could put it to bed after this. But Chris Torres saying, I don't understand how the MLB still can't get it right with these balls. It's incredible. Patty in NYC, if the balls were decent, well-made, there wouldn't be so many sticky issues. And Chris Ram saying it's all just reactionary. It's not thought out. And it brings me back to the first comment that came through, which was Keith saying the MLB should be like, hey, KBO, hey, Japan, can we see the tackiness of your baseballs? Wow, these might work. I mean, we've talked about it before on the show, going back to when it happened to Max Scherzer. The fact that all baseballs need to be rubbed with mud.
I was waiting for this.
Section of the Delaware fucking water gap is ridiculous. It is absolutely insane. You're a billion-dollar industry. Could you imagine if the NFL was like, listen, we understand that Tom Brady deflated balls, but what you really need to focus on is the fact that if we don't go to the swamp in rural Louisiana and rub these footballs down, none of it's going to matter. Are you kidding me? This is insane. How many times you have to change the fucking baseball? Live ball era, dead ball era, year of the pitcher, too sticky, not sticky enough. What are we doing? It's a fucking baseball.
I was just going to say, on this topic, I was like, at the same time, like, I want things to get proper, but I was waiting for the Delaware water gap outbreak to come because I've seen it like 3 or 4 times already. I was like, I don't want it to go. I want to keep that red because it's one of my favorite ones.
Jesus, I'm sorry. I guess we got a little saplicata there on that one. Okay, so let's take a pause. We have more Mets stuff to talk about because it is clear Carson hates Drew Smith. I didn't know that about him. I don't really like Drew Smith. I just think he's a very average pitcher like that you would have in the middle of your relief corps, and gets used way too much in situations he shouldn't be used in.
He's high leverage, and he's not supposed to be high leverage.
Correct. He should be a guy pitching like the 5th or 6th inning, not the guy coming in to try to close out a game. Right. But I digress. For everybody watching live, it is the best way to interact with the show. We're about 40 minutes in. We're going to take a quick break. It is 10 seconds long here on the live stream. So if you're watching this, you said, hey, I don't want to sit through a break. Don't worry. We'll be back before you realize it. It is just something that we need a quick ad break for the audio version of this podcast. So it's John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez, our guest this week, Carson. We will see you guys in a few moments. Yo, just like that, we are back with Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on Twitter. We are live on YouTube.
I mean, if you wanted me to bring it up, I could, but, you know.
Patty and NYC saying Carson from Mets Weekly is so calm.
They've taken me out, I'll tell you. I mean, I've never been hard. So, like...
Yeah.
Carson, you know, you and I have never talked before. Obviously, we've interacted on Twitter. You don't come across as calm to me right now. You come across as a man who is defeated, actually. That's what it is. You come across as a man defeated by the New York Mets, which honestly, that puts you in a very short list because the Mets haven't defeated many people this season.
It comes in spurts. When I'm angry, I'm angry. When I'm just like, I don't want to deal with this, I'm in full on sadness. I root for 4 sports teams that suck and piss me off to my core. So, I mean, a quartet of sadness is like what I would like to say. But at this point, I just like, I just, there's so much, and like, you know, whatever you can get angry about and whatever you can't get angry about, it's exhausting. It really is exhausting. And, you know, Drew Smith not being here for 10 games, I'm okay with that.
This is the time in the show where we would like to give our guests the opportunity to, plug their social media, plug their projects and all that stuff. So real quick, I'm sure a lot of people follow you, make great content. You're out on Twitter, but if they don't already and they want to follow you, they want to listen and all that stuff, where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, I mainly just do the podcast, Mets Weekly, on our channel called Mets Weekly. We do that every Monday I have 2 main co-hosts, Andrew and Frank, who we get our point across. I can say that. We're very brutally honest. We're not going to tell you what you want to hear. We're going to tell you what you need to hear. And, you know, if we're wrong at one point, everyone's going to own up to it, but we're still going to scream at the top of our lungs sometimes. And, you know, it gets messy. You know, it happens.
It never happens. Never happens on this show.
Yeah. You know, and you know, you can take it any way that you want. And, you know, there's some people, there's some people that go after us and it happens, but, you know, I take it as more comedy than ever.
Funny. Also a thing that doesn't happen on this show at all. Nobody ever comes after us for our
funny
take.
Thing, the one thing I had to bring up, the one thing I had to bring up because I think it's funny because John has his downfalls when it comes to Twitter, and I always laugh at yours.
Don't know how you do that.
I always laugh at Carson.
Spend a lot of time at airports.
A lot of times, like maybe it's because I see Carson's show and I see how he carries himself, and a lot of times when he puts out a tweet that is clearly sarcasm, and I know it's hard to convey tone and text and things like that, but it's clearly sarcasm. He'll put one out there, and then people hop right into his comments, like ripping him apart. I'm like, does nobody understand that this is just he's not being serious here? But I love seeing it because then he'll go back at them for a little bit, but no one's to John's level. No one's leveled up to that point yet. I still don't know how he does it either.
Well, listen, Patty in NYC says, I subbed to Mets Weekly. Last episode was brutally honest. Thumbs up. And then we've got a great idea from Keith. I have to go make some Sap Licata shirts for the December QBC. Please, please, please do that.
Do it.
Okay, we've got about 15, 20-ish minutes left in the show to play with. So I want all three of us here to be brutally honest, since that's kind of where we've gone for a second. So, Carson, I'm going to start with you. A lot of controversy has come out. Fire this person, DFA this person. This is what we need to do. And I've long played the role of, hey, it's too early to do that, because I think a lot of it was people wanted to fire Buck in April. People wanted to, DFA Tommy Pham on May 1st. Like, organizations that are good don't do things like that. They simply do not. It doesn't make sense. We don't need to rehash that. Everybody who watches and listens to this show know how me and Ibby feel about that. I have now turned over a new leaf. I think that we're not a new leaf. I think it's no longer too early. I said it last week with Vogelback. I think he needs to go, but I also think it's pretty apparent now that a shakeup needs to happen on the coaching staff side. I have my feelings about who it should be. I tweeted it out last night. Do you think there should be a change coming in the coach's realm for this Mets team very soon? And who do you think it should be?
I think that whether you shake whatever you want to shake up, you got to do something. And because, they're just going to continue to fall and fall and fall, because we've seen that this team, in spurts, they gain momentum really quick and they lose it really quick as well. So I'd love to say everybody, but at this point, I think that the first domino to fall would probably be Jeremy Hefner. And I think that it's definitely something that I've thought about for a long time, because a lot of these arms that fare well in this era of baseball, they either get hurt or they get turned into, just complete glue. Like that's what I've seen with Jeremy Hefner so much. Tyler McGill is a big example, which I've talked about a lot, where this guy, for, a good few weeks, this guy was showing that he had a potential to be an ace. Like that last year at the beginning of the year, he looked like he was going to be an ace. And then they screwed up the release point. They brought him back to being a 6'7" pitcher that pitches vertically, having ridiculous drop on a fastball, and it just basically looks like a complete hanger. So there's just some adjustments that I've seen that Jeremy Hefner makes. I'm a huge analytical guy. I don't know about how you guys feel about that stuff, but I like to see a lot of things of a lot of adjustments that a lot of pitchers make, especially with their repertoire and stuff like that. Like, there's some things that Jeremy Hefner does that or tries to adjust or tries to do that I don't understand it. Like, there's a few pitchers that we've DFA'd before that we've completely given up on, who could have been fantastic with a certain adjustment. Now, I'm not a pitching coach whatsoever, but this is things that I just like to biblically study, like day in and day out. And there's one example of a guy that we've DFA'd, Jimmy Yacobonis. Very huge movement on a slider, a near explosive sinker. And these things go two different directions. Like, the movement on him, they're two different directions. You need a bridge pitch, kind of what Jeff Brigham did, adding a cutter. So there's a reason why. I mean, I've seen that, in terms of health, in terms of just conditioning, in terms of just overall performance, and underperforming with the just the ceiling that some of these pitchers have. I mean, maybe you can say Drew Smith was one of them at one point, but at this point, he's just far gone. But I mean, there's some things that I see with him as the pitching coach, that few things that he seems to adjust, and then he just kind of just does the bare minimum. And that's something that really, it confuses me a lot, seeing the adjustments that he makes sometimes.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That's the person that I tweeted about last night. If you're in the chat right now, react to that. If there's somebody that you want gone, Patty in NYC saying yes, Hefner, and I'll add Barnes. As far as the hitting coach goes, Ibby, what's your thoughts? Not necessarily on what Carson said, but just where we are right now, because you and I have been pretty much in lockstep. We've been steadfast. A change didn't need to be made yet, but I think the time has come. Change.
The frustration and the patience is running thin as more and more games come, and there's not any change in sight in terms of how the team is performing. So yes, changes should be made. And Cohen comes out and says this thing this past week, and how he's not going to be reactionary. He's going to let things go. And when I read that, I kind of take it as like I automatically said to myself, like, All-Star break. Like, All-Star break is probably the area he's going to aim for if there are changes that are going to be made. And look, I always say, like, the first people that go when things like this happen for a team, since you can't fire every single player, even though the ones that are at fault here are the players, you have to go out there and actually perform to whatever you're getting paid or whatever it is. Like, you got to go out there and play the game. But that's not how this works. That's not how baseball works. So I look at it and I go, yes, I can easily say the first ones that are going to go are always hitting or pitching coach, whichever option they choose to go first. That's always the first domino to fall. We've seen Chili Davis before be a scapegoat. We've seen Dave Island and guys like that. Like, they've been scapegoats and just get them out, bring in a fresh perspective. Now, so I'm fine if that ends up being the case. I think, like, the one thing I have when it comes to someone like Barnes is I would understand it more if Eric Chavez was not here anymore, mainly because it's like, is the philosophy really going to change that much? Now, granted, someone's given a position.
Not. You're right.
Someone's going to be given a position, and you're going to say, look, this is what I talked about, but look, this is your job now. Do what you got to do. But at the same time, it's like, we saw success when this person was the hitting coach. We thought we might have been getting something after that first inning yesterday and how they were doing. It kind of felt like last year as opposed to what they've been doing. And then, of course, everything just goes to shit. But I would think that when someone is still in house, I wouldn't think that much would change. But I feel like I'm watching a completely different offensive team in comparison to last year in terms of approach, when everyone is still in house from the player side as well as the coaching side. So that's why I'm so confused when it comes to the hitting side. To Carson's point, like, I think it is probably going to be Hefner. I think he will be someone that is moved. Now, I don't know if I have a hard time seeing how this team has been because of what we've talked about for the longest time. And that is, they don't want to come off as dysfunctional. But at the same time, if you continuously hold on to something, that in itself shows dysfunction. So it's like, you have to make a decision. You have to be like, we're getting rid of this and we're going to go from there. Do I think that it's proper that a lot of people assume, moving off of them for a second and going to someone like Buck? Do I think it's proper that a lot of people assume that what happened with the Phillies is the norm? I think that's improper. I don't think that when you just fire a manager, you're automatically going to go on this huge run. You're going to go to the World Series. I don't believe that so much. But I do think that you're going to look at those secondary pieces, if you will, in terms of the hierarchy that are probably moved. And that's most likely Hefner, Barnes, Hinsky. Like, those types are going to be moved off the staff if this continues.
Yeah, I mean, look, Shea is sharing a brain with you. He said, in all seriousness, Barnes should be the first to go, should have been out for a while. And this is where he echoes everything you said. Our hitting philosophy has been off since he took the helm. Hefner, I can understand. Look at what he's had to work with. And for me, that's why it's Hefner above all. That's what I tweeted out last night. And look, some of these things, I've got to be fair and I've got to be honest. I don't hold him accountable, right? We talk about the stickiness with Drew Smith and him getting suspended for that. I don't hold Hefner accountable for that. But this is the second time it's happened in a few weeks to a member of the Mets pitching staff. That is embarrassing. And when your record is as bad as your record is, and your pitching ERA is as high as it is throughout the rotation and the bullpen, and you're looking at guys like Max Scherzer, who's been an ace his entire life, and Justin Verlander, who's been an ace his entire life, and they get here and all of a sudden they seem to be a shell of their former selves. You look at Tyler McGill, something that you mentioned, Carson, spot on. And I just asked the question, who on this team has Jeremy Hefner made better? And I'm not sure that the answer is anyone. If you want to sit there and say maybe he had a hand in the Edwin Diaz resurgence, that's fine. But Edwin Diaz did it when he was in Seattle. he had an all-time great season as a closer in Seattle. So maybe
being comfortable for Diaz.
Right. Maybe he helped him tap back into something, Carson, but I don't think he unlocked something, whereas everybody else seems to come here and isn't as good. So to me, Hefner is the obvious choice. And look, I don't like to come for people's jobs. Everybody needs a job, right? So I don't want to fire this guy, fire that guy. But look, the Mets are terrible. Those standings are disgusting. They're 10 games back now, 4.5 back in the wild card. That's disgusting. This team has the highest payroll in the history of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, just to continue the point, it's something I mentioned. I couldn't tell you how many episodes ago, but something that was always alarming to me, and that has always been the organization in general, in terms of players, hitting or pitching side. I think it says a lot about you as an organization when players leave here and they do better. Now, if you want, like, everyone's going to automatically, everyone always does the same thing. And that is, oh, this guy couldn't handle New York. That's not a New York ball player. Blah, blah, blah. They couldn't handle the pressure. They couldn't handle the media. That's always the scapegoat. But I'm sorry. There's no reason why a lot of people that come here just forget how to play the game or just like de-escalate in terms of their overall, stature and everything that much. And then they go elsewhere and it's like, well, look, there are guys that were just clearly not going to work here. And I understand, like, J.D. Davis was never going to work here. It just wasn't. But now he's in San Francisco and he's killing it. Michael Conforto, absolutely. Michael Conforto over the last 25 games has been fucking killing it. And he looks like the guy we all thought he was going to be. Travis d'Arnaud, I can keep going down the line about players that it didn't work here. But again, that also to me comes from a developmental standpoint. Guys that just aren't doing well here, but then they go elsewhere. And it's like, well, what is the secret sauce for everyone else? How is everyone else figuring out how to make a J.D. Davis work, a Michael Conforto work? Even to a lesser extent, like Dom Smith. I haven't looked at him recently, but the fact that he's hitting the ball at all for Washington is something. It's like, I mean, Gary Sanchez is another.
That's more of a lightning in a bottle situation. I think Sanchez was either going to hit here or hit at the next place. He hits home runs.
And that to me, that doesn't matter because I love what I've been seeing from Francisco Alvarez, and I'm glad that he's playing. So it's like that I don't care so much about, but it's a question that needs to be asked in terms of the overall organization when it comes to development and how to get the most out of players. And that's always been a question I've had over the last couple of years.
Justin R. saying Edwin, Carrasco last year, McGill last year. I think that's in response to who has Hefner made better, but I'll double down on what I said on Edwin Diaz, where he already did it somewhere else. I'm going to just refer back to what Carson said about how he basically made McGill worse. And Cookie Carrasco was a really good pitcher, has been a really good pitcher for the bulk of his career, and he's got a bad elbow. And when the elbow acts up, he pitches terribly, and when he's healthy, he's good.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's a show. It's just a show of age with Carrasco. Yeah. Like that's just been a show of age, and that's the thing with Carrasco. I mean, I've talked about this before, like way before. I talked about how he put up a quality season last year, and they should have moved him as an expiring free agent to try and make the rotation a little bit younger, and kind of like how they did with Steven Matz with the getting a few arms for one arm, and and they didn't do that. They kept it older and everything. And, I think that there's at this point with Carrasco, oh God. But there's so many pitchers on this team that just like, I don't know. They look like, oh, delayed start today. Great.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, Ant Rivera saying, Anthony DeComo saying the game is being delayed due to weather. Are you guys going up to game time? I don't know about up to game time, but if you guys want to go for a little bit longer, we can. If you guys both have the time to do it.
Forever.
I have some more stuff I want to talk about, and this is a good question from David. Carson, I'm going to throw this over to you because you love analytics. You said it earlier. He said, do you think analytics is too much for the players? It feels similar to 2021, the way hitters have been this year, strikingly similar. So what's your thoughts on that? Because, Douglas Barnes followed it up by saying analytics has been the slow death of baseball. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think there is sometimes paralysis by analysis, too much numbers for the wrong people.
Also, was Hugh Fallaham a real person? That's the follow-up.
Don't know. I have no idea.
Was Hugh Quattlebaum a real person?
I don't know. They probably just generated that doing it in a lab because that was what we saw.
He was like the first guy generated by AI. They were like, let's make a baseball player, coach that nobody's ever heard of. Ant Rivera saying, we want more. So anyway, that's anyway, go to your comment on it.
Hit the thumbs up hit the thumbs up while you're here, please.
It's hard to say because it kind of just works different for every single player. And I think that we kind of get lost in this where, it's all analytics. It's all analytics that is being driven into it, and it's ruining everything. It's more of just kind of like, especially with the Mets, philosophy and kind of how they've kind of brought these players into their kind of how they brought them into their organization. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm ever going to defend Daniel Vogelbach because he is the most useless player I've ever seen in my life. But there was a point where this guy, and one thing that I love with hitters now that you have to do, especially with the shift gone, pulling the ball. And he doesn't do that anymore. And he, whenever he does pull the ball, the thing's going on the ground. So at this point, the Mets have hitters that in this era of baseball don't necessarily work. And that's something that I feel like it's something that I think we're all ignoring. Like, yeah, last year we had that success, but you're not, if you don't hit homers, you don't hit the ball hard, you don't pull the ball, you don't do stuff like that, you're not going to win in the postseason against elite pitching. It's just not going to happen. And, they can be good players. They can be good hitters at any point. They get their hits and they get their singles and they get their this. It's just not, it's like pulling teeth, this type of offense. And it looks even worse without Pete Alonso here, which I'm really nervous for the next few weeks of how that looks like. Because Pete Alonso was the only way who made it somewhat sustainable. And, a lot of, and watchable. 2015 Royals. I know everyone will bring that up. 2015 Royals, 8 years ago. I mean, that's been a while. Yeah. Time flies. It really does. 8 years ago, we saw Jerry's Familia choking away 3 games. It really has changed. But the Royals still had a few sustained hitters on that team, that guys who actually went for extra base hits. They had a fantastic bullpen, which you also need to succeed. The Mets, they had Edwin Diaz last year, but Adam Ottavino was like the only guy you could really trust out of there in high leverage. So it's like you need a good team, and this doesn't look like a good team. Like that's how it looks like to me.
I think Ant Rivera said something great just about 2 particular, advanced statistics, but I think it encapsulates a lot of what you're talking about here. And I think really the way a lot of people should feel about the approach to analytics. And it's a 2-part comment. He said, exit velocity and hit rate are cool unless your players are consistently getting out. And he followed it up by saying, don't care if someone hits the ball hard if they don't result in hits and RBIs. And, the analogy that I always make, Carson, is, it's sort of like the running back being devalued in the NFL. Now, should you take a running back 1 overall, top 5? No, probably not, because, Alvin Kamara has come out of the 4th round. These things happen. But then as a Jets fan, I had to deal with people saying, I can't believe the Jets traded up 2 picks to get Breece Hall, when it was like, dude, they got maybe the best running back in all of college football last year, and he proved to be that before he blew out his knee. At pick 34. You can't devalue it so much where you're like, oh, you don't even need running back. You still need them. And I think that's how you look at the advanced statistics versus the what do you call it? The run-of-the-mill statistics, right? Do I think RBI and batting average matter the way that they did 30 years ago? No, because we can look deeper. But when somebody goes, oh, I don't care that Pete's leading the lead in RBI, it's a made-up stat. No, it's not.
Yeah. Those are the analytical ones that just they think they're too good for the game of baseball. I mean, it's one of those things where they all twine in together. And the one thing that I really, really try to push, especially again, like with the shift going away, you have to pull the ball. You have to swing early. It has the biggest barrel window. So, and that's how you can hit for power. Most of the extra base hits, most of the home runs in this game the best results come from pulling the ball. When you see this Mets team, especially for Mets fans, oh, they hit the ball hard. That's great. He hit the ball hard, but it went into an out. That's because they're not pulling the damn thing. And that's something that we don't really see that much. Starling Marte, one of those guys who pisses me off, who does not pull the ball enough. And I know that he has a quick enough bat to do that. Jeff McNeil, when I see this guy slam his helmet and when the thing lands into left center field, pull the freaking ball. That's one of those things that gets the most sustainable results. And they don't have that. They also have older players who don't have quick bat speed like some of the prolific power hitters in this game. So the thing about this offense is that not only is it outdated, is it old? Is it an approach that is not going to sustain to the postseason when you're trying to be a contending team? It also is something that it's just not going to sustain whatsoever. And having 4 singles in a row, making solid contact with something off of elite pitching, it's just not going to happen. You need bat speed, you need power, this is the type of game it is. If I could, at this point, with what happens, true, exactly. At this point, with what happens in this game and how driven it is to power, I really would prefer, because this base to the station type of baseball, at this point, sometimes I impulsively prefer them to, when it looks like it's going to be a single, try to leg it out into a double, because you're just going to hit into a double play the next batter. Like, that's literally how it feels in this sort of game of baseball, because singles just feel so vulnerable. It really is, because anyone who hits the ball on the ground, double play. It's just that's literally how it looks in this game of baseball. And the shift going away, and with pitchers throwing harder, you need bat speed. You need guys to hit the ball hard, and you need guys to swing early. You need guys to pull the ball. And the Mets don't really have that. And they have this approach that doesn't do it. So when you see it fly ball to opposite field, don't cross your fingers that it's going to go out, because most likely it's not going to. 3% of oppo fly balls this year go out of the stadium. So, it's just not a sustained outlook. You have guys who just don't have the bat speed, and they look overmatched, like Clay Holmes against, Francisco Lindor, even though he does have that bat speed, especially from the right side. So it's just something that it's like, I don't know. It at this point, it's screw the batting average and hit for power and sacrifice contact for power, and that's how you win in this game. And obviously, I think that you need some contact guys, as I like to call them. We call them noodles, like pool noodles, who don't hit the ball hard. Guys at the bottom, guys at the top. Nimmo and I like McNeil at the bottom of the lineup. That's just my preference. But the guys who don't hit the ball hard, that are there to hit for contact, I think that there's a need for that. There's definitely a need for that, but it needs to be a lot more power driven, and they don't have that. And it looks even worse without Pete Alonso here.
Douglas Barnes saying the exact opposite. It'd be singles feel that way because analytics has replaced fundamentals. And I do think there is a lack of fundamentals.
It's true. That is true. Yeah.
By conventional standpoint. But the biggest fallacy, Ibby, for me in modern baseball is that power hitters, and I'm not talking about guys who are launch angle and selling out everything 100% to hit the ball out of the ballpark all the time. But I do think the biggest fallacy is what Carson said earlier, where they say, guys who make contact is what wins, in the playoffs. It's not true, because you're not going to string 4 hits together in an inning against the guy like, the way Sandy Alcantara pitched last year. You're not going to string 4 singles together and hope he walks you and then hits a guy. You know how you win those games? How did the Mets lose to the Braves in that series? Everybody said, can't the Mets just win one game? The Braves bludgeoned us to death. The Braves hit home runs with men on base, and they turned the game around. All of a sudden, you're losing 2-0. Boom, one swing, you're up 3-2.
It's easy to think the way of that old school approach, as we're talking 2015. That Royals team was 8 years ago now. It's a different game looking at nearly a decade later, because it's like, to the point you just made, it's hard to string together 4 hits to score a run, because
especially when you have Daniel Vogelbach on the base pass who can only move.
Right. You're going station to station.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at it, it's like, look, 10, 20, 30 years ago, as you look at the game, like, the pitching was different. Now you have guys that are throwing 98, 99, 100 miles an hour with a lot of horizontal movement on top and secondary pitches. Like, it's not easy. So it's almost as if, sometimes you got to run into a couple of fastballs that you can put over the fence to try to give yourself a little bit of cushion, because it's not easy to get 4 or 5 hits in a row to score a run. And that's what this team is banking on, and why this team doesn't do much unless Lindor and Pete, who's not in the lineup right now, but unless those guys are thriving in the lineup. That's why nothing else is actually happening. Because when those guys are the ones that are providing the RBIs and scoring the runs, it's those other guys, the Nimos, the McNeils, the Martes, who are, getting on base and doing their part. But the ones that are scoring the runs are thanks to Lindor hitting a gap or hitting a home run, or Pete hitting a home run. Like, that's what has to happen. And it's not happening in this lineup, because it can't happen in this lineup.
Douglas Barnes saying fundamentals should never be considered old school. Baseball happens too fast to not be locked into fundamentals. I think we're having a semantics debate here that, we all kind of agree. Like, I'm not sitting here saying don't be fundamental. Like, don't stay down on the ball, right? Like, I played baseball and softball my whole life.
I'm not saying free swinging whatsoever. Right. There's pitch recognition that you need to have.
Absolutely. And
something we talk about with Ronnie Mauricio a lot.
Right. That's and sometimes you have to shorten up and go the other way, right? Like, Lindor didn't need to pull a home run last night to have a productive at bat in that bases loaded, so he can be fundamental and he could slap the ball the other way. Right. But I just think that in certain counts, in certain situations, you're not looking to do that because your percentages are way down. The percentages of you hitting the ball the other way and getting a hit is not great.
It's the point of sacrificing contact for power. If you can make actual good contact with something, you might as well swing a lot harder. Like, that's basically the point. And that's something that really has come into baseball recently, where it's fueled by the home run ball. That's what the offense is. And, you need those guys who are, if you make a mistake, and you're going to see a lot of mistakes these days with the pitch clock, command is an issue in baseball this year. And you're going to continue to see that. Drew Smith, you're fucked. So at this point, I mean, someone is eventually going to make a mistake. And when you make that mistake, I don't want a single. I want you to hit the thing over the fence. I want an extra base hit. And anything that can take away the possibility of a double play, which I know this team loves to hit into. They love to pound the ball into the ground. Drives me nuts. But, I mean...
you're probably a big Brett Beatty guy right now. Not trying to trigger you, not just trying to.
Oh my Lord! I thought we fixed this. I really did. Thought we fixed it, but you know what?
The one thing I want to throw in real quick from Joe K. Let's be honest. The lineup of 3 true outcome guys like Kyle Schwarber is boring. Look, I'm not saying Kyle Schwarber is a good hitter.
I like,
in my opinion, I like home runs. I do. I'm not saying that the entire lineup is going to be top to bottom all Kyle Schwarbers, but like, if this lineup had, I don't know, maybe 4 guys. I'll say 4 that I can trust that can put the ball over the fence. And then you have maybe another one who's maybe a little bit up and down. The other guys can get on base like the McNeils and the Nimos like that. Like, that balances the lineup a little bit better, where you can have power throughout the given line, like sprinkled through the whole lineup where you can keep things moving like that. Like that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that I want I don't want the same profile for every single hitter. I know, but I think that's what people
and that's what you
to,
have right now, and that's the problem.
And I think that's what people are misconstruing it as.
We have the same profile for every hitter, and you know what the profile is. And I'm not dumping on this guy because I like him as a player and a personality. He's a good role player, but we have the same profile throughout our lineup, and it's Mark Canha. Like, I would take a lineup of Kyle Schwarber's over a lineup of Mark Canha. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference there.
See, that's the problem is that this Mark Canha that you're seeing is not the Mark Canha that you saw in 2018, 2019. My dad's a huge A's fan.
I love that Mark Canha.
Yes.
My dad's a huge A's fan. I mean, I grew up watching like all these A's players. Then whenever they come to the Mets, I'm like, oh, you got to know about this guy. This guy's great and whatever. Mark Canha, that man, you know, he knew how to get his extra base hits. He knew how to get, and then he got hurt and he had that whole hip. He's 34 years old. He's older. He's a different player now.
Right.
And I mean, I think he's, you know, he talked about how he wants to hit for more power, but you're not going to, man. You're just not going to. He just doesn't have it.
And I don't want to dump on him. I don't want to make it like the
absolutely not.
Mark Canha
He
show.
Just regressed as a player. It's just
it is what it is.
But we have a lot of guys like that. We have a lot of guys losing bat speed, to your point. We have a lot of guys coming off of injuries that are later. You know, there's a reason why guys come up. Everybody goes, oh, look at this dude with the Reds. Look at what O'Neal Cruz is doing. Look at this guy. Oh my God, I can't believe Alvarez can hit all these home runs. He's 21 years old. He's
young.
Strong. His body is healthy. He's going to hit the ball. They were joking around about could you hit a 500-foot home run? Yes, probably.
Simply put it, get rid of the old guys. That's it. That's all I ask. I can't. It's too old. Too many old people.
You know what? To bring the conversation full circle, I think it's more so about getting rid of, I think under the right circumstances, older pitchers can work. Now, not necessarily 40-year-olds, right? And again, I'm not going to hate on the thought process of them bringing in Max and Verlander, but I think you could have a guy who didn't start pitching till later, or a guy who figured it out later, that he bounced around, doesn't have a ton of innings. He could be 35, 36 years old, be excellent. But I think for hitters, you know, the guys who can hit home runs into their late 30s post-steroid era are few and far between. Ibby, you want guys that are 22, 23, 24 years old. These are the kinds of players you want.
Yes, you want
in the everyday lineup.
That's why everybody's been clamoring for the Beatties and Alvarez and Viet. Like, they want youth because everybody is just so old. Like, it's just
everyone loves the shiny new toy because everyone talks about it. But the point is, you want youth. You want to have, because when you look around baseball, and I said this multiple times on the show, when you look around baseball and you're seeing, like, when this team was so apprehensive of calling up or utilizing Alvarez, or not starting the year with Beatty, or not playing Mark Vientos, or holding back Ronnie Mauricio. Meanwhile, when you look across baseball and you see all the fun that these young teams and these are having success. Now, look, not every young player is Corbin Carroll. Not every young player is Jordan Walker. I understand that, but at the same time, you're seeing other franchises allow these young players to go through their bumps, to play, and then you get excited that once they start getting it, now you have that moving forward. Like, that's the whole point.
You have the possible upside of that possibly happening, and that's definitely, you know, you see the ceiling of that player. Of, we know what they could do. We know what their ceiling possibly is. Let's see them play. Mark Vientos is definitely one of those prime examples of that, who, in my opinion, needs to be sent down to AAA if they're not going to play the guy.
Yes.
But, you know, it's just, that's a different story. But I mean, I would play him right now. He's playing tonight, so who knows? But if he gets a hit, he'll probably get benched. Who knows? But I don't know. I think right there that just don't work, you know.
I think you right there kind of sums up this episode. Like, I don't know. I might call it that. I might call it the episode.
Okay, I don't know. Do we have time for one more thing, or am I going to open up a can of worms, Ibby? What do we have time for?
It depends. What's the one more thing?
I have two more things on the docket. One of them, they're both players that are on the Mets that are. They're not pitchers, but they don't really play a position, and both of their last names start with a V.
I mean, if we can make it quick, if not, I might be pressed on this one.
All right, I'm gonna just mention this because I want to get Carson's take on it more than anything else because we've been talking about it tangentially. Here's the video.
Buck just wanted to give me a kind of just maybe mental break, not necessarily can use it that way. Just like I said the other day, just trying to get my swing back to the ultimate goal of helping the New York Mets win. And I feel like when my swing is where it needs to be and I'm swinging the bat the way that I know I'm capable of swinging the bat, I can make this lineup better. And that's the ultimate goal, is to get back to doing what I've done my whole career.
Carson, to provide context, everybody, once again, that's Daniel Vogelbach, last night's post game, courtesy SNY, all that stuff. To provide context, Ibby and I talked a lot on this show over the last several weeks and months about how, Vogelbach is a useless player. He's a one-dimensional player. He's highly flawed. However, there was a time where you look at it and you say, he's not the biggest culprit on this offense. There was a time when you look around and you're like,
for a lot of people.
Yeah, you get all the way down to Vogelbach. It's like, hey, you're skipping like 5 starting guys that have been more of a problem. You're just picking on Vogelbach because he's getting more at-bats than the young kid that you want, right? And again, I said a lot, you don't want to cut a guy like that May 1st, because what if Vientos goes 6 for 45? You have to send Vientos down. Now, who's your DH? Guillorme? Is it Danny Mendick? Like, where do you go? You wind up with a player who's worse than both. Over the last couple weeks, we have both turned. We said the clock has struck for Daniel Vogelbach. He obviously wasn't playing, which was a big point of that entire interview he just did, where the Mets were giving him a break. I would like to know from you, from your perspective, because we talked about this a lot last week, what has Daniel Vogelbach done in his major league career to deserve the treatment that he is getting?
Well, in terms of mental breaks, let me ask you this first. When's my mental break? That's what I want to know. But
yeah, you ain't getting one. Shay saying, my God, who put the horror movie on the screen? And then Douglas Barnes, this is messed up, but I'm going to pull it up because it's funny. He said, I had to put on widescreen.
What has Daniel Vogelbach done? That's it. That's it.
The audio, for everybody listening to the audio show of this, the audio did not drop out there. There was just an exacerbated look from Carson.
I mean, he really is one of the most one-dimensional players that we would talk about him pretty much every week on our.
We talk about him too much here.
Off on this, man. I mean, the most one-dimensional player known to man. All he does is the best thing that he can do is walk against right-handed pitching, and that's just something that, yes, I would have moved on from Daniel Vogelbach a lot earlier than a lot of people would have. But I also would have done that in addition to actually stacking a lot of power bats in the minor leagues and guys like who we just signed, the other guy that starts with a guy that's name starts with a V, bringing in those types of guys for spring training, a surplus of those power bats. It would have been nice to do that. There was guys out there. There was Franmil Reyes, who has had prolific power in his career before. There's Luke Voigt. There was Gary Sanchez. There was Miguel Sano, who was available. Just a bunch of these guys who you could possibly just get, see which one sticks. If they don't stick, they're in a minor league deal. Who cares?
Yeah.
Move on from it. So the fact that they didn't want to do that, that makes it more frustrating. And you look at it, Daniel Vogelbach's still here. He's still here. And yes, I'm not ready to give the full-on keys to Mark Vientos, but he needs to play. And the fact that we're looking at the alternative being Daniel Vogelbach, you might as well give it to Mark Vientos.
Ibby, I'm going to give you the last word on this, but I'm just going to jump into the comments real quick because people are chiming in, and you're not going to be surprised. Aunt Rivera, what has he done to deserve this? Nothing. Patty in NYC, less aggressive, but got nothing. David, just exactly what
speechless
Carson,
emoji.
Speechless,
yes.
Speechless emoji. So your final thought on Daniel Vogelbach, and then we'll get out of here. on why he continues to get this rope, as if, like, I made the analogy last week about Robinson Cano. And the reason why I used Cano was because he didn't have a good tenure, and he had a lot of baggage with the steroid stuff and all that. But there was a legit track record of success. Prior to the steroid suspension that happened in Seattle, Robinson Cano was going to be in the Hall of Fame more than likely. So if you want to look and say, yeah, I know he's 37 years old, but, look, he's Robinson Cano. Daniel Vogelback's never been Robinson Cano, not for a blink.
The two things real quick. I'll get to my Vogelback point, but the one thing is, if you're going to have a player come out and put out in the open that he's being given a mental break, one thing that sticks out to me right away from a roster construction, from a lineup construction, if he wasn't going to be playing, you can't give me any reason as to why the break that you were going to give him, why that time was not dedicated to find out if Mark Vientos can provide anything. That itself sticks out to me, and that pisses me off. Number two, the outlier seasons of a player are what normally stick out, specifically when they're not that good of a ball player. It's almost as if they are treating Daniel Vogelback as to what his 2019 season was, when the ball was juiced and he hit 30 home runs over 460 at-bats with 76 RBIs when he was in Seattle. But when you look at the rest of his career, he's not that. So you can kind of put things together and say, outlier season, what's different than the rest? What was different in 2019? Ball was juiced. Everyone was hitting home runs. His numbers were up. And now you're going to sit here and actually act like that is the player that he is. Yes,
great point.
Between the two spots that he was in last year, he hits 18 home runs. But again, it's nothing that is worthy based off of track record, based off of career, based off what he provides from an offensive and a defensive standpoint, which is next to nothing. It doesn't warrant this much of a rope. If you were telling me that Fernando Tatis Jr. was having a rough go and he needed a break, I would understand that because he provides something. But this is not that type of player, which is why I don't understand the apprehension. But if I'm going to give a point, it would be it's happening because they don't want the similar backlash that they got for Darren Ruff. It's the same exact thing. They finally bit the bullet later than they should have. It's the same thing that's going on here. It's more broadcasted because it's happening during the season.
And look, everybody who listens to the show and watches this show knows how me and Ibby feel about, players being people and players needing, stop looking at them like machines. So I'm not poo-pooing the mental break. Daniel Vogelback has had a really tough go of it here this season. If you want to give the guy the break, give him a break. But I just don't understand how he's still on the team, for one.
From a
I don't understand.
Standpoint,
yeah, exactly. And like Ibby said, why do you not give those at bats to Vientos then?
We can bring in the current scenario here. You're already down a pitcher in Drew Smith. You have Daniel Vogelbach now, who when he is playing provides absolutely no value, and now he's pretty much just doing the same thing he usually does. But it's a 24-man roster right now. If you have Daniel Vogelbach on a mental break, you have Drew Smith out for the next 10 games. Now, do I enjoy watching either of those players? No, but you need you don't have a 26-man roster. So you have 24 guys here.
The way they're going
your
around
bullpen will get even more taxed.
Right. And the way they're going around it is because they have 2 breaks this week, they're choosing to drop a fifth starter instead of making a decision. And that's when you sit here as a fan and go, why are you so afraid to make this decision? I've talked about giving vets their shots. I knew that this team, I said from day one that they were going to give the veterans the shot over the young kid, which is why I said they weren't going to start with Beatty. They were going to start with Escobar. And that's what ended up happening. But it's gotten to a point where 70 games in, the experiment's well over.
And you're right, because look, I agree with Carson. You agree with Carson about having younger people on the roster. The upside potential is important. But, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when you have a team that wins 101 games last year and you bring them all back. You say, okay, look, we're going to give these guys a fair shake. But 70 games is more than a fair shake. I'm going to go to the last comment here with Shay. He, meaning Daniel Vogelback, has never justified being a Met. He even ruined the milkshake song for me, and I blame Vogelback for Khalees dating Bill Murray now. It's all his fault. That is a great comment. I absolutely love that. Guys, we went a little bit longer because the Mets and the Yankees are in a delay, but it looks like they're going to start soon. So I think we should get out of here. Carson, thank you so much for
thank you so much,
doing
Carson.
the show,
kicked ass,
but
man. Really
providing great
Thanks for having
insight.
me.
A different perspective than what we normally get, quite honestly. And thank you for giving us extra time. So one more time, let people know where they can find you and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can follow our podcast on Twitter. It is Mets Weekly Pod, Mets Weekly on YouTube, where we do our podcast every single Monday. Comes out Monday, recorded on Sunday. It's a crazy process of getting that stuff out, but usually kicks my ass every single week. But it's worth it when it comes out. And we just talk about the things that go on during the week, just like you guys, and brutally honest, and we don't hold back. There's some brutal insults that come in with it. It just all comes from passion and a fan base that just wants to win, and that's pretty much it. Hopefully I can get my old Twitter back, but right now I'm at Mets Fan Can't Talk.
There you go. All right, so you can go ahead and follow him. Make sure to subscribe. A lot of people really appreciating what we did. Patty and NYC, such a good show. Douglas Barnes, fun show, and of course, we wouldn't be able to do it without you guys watching, listening, and kind of telling us where we're going right, where we're going wrong, and all that fun stuff. Keeping us accountable. Ibby, what do you got to say before we go?
The only thing I'll say is my final thought is I'm not going to even bother asking for anything. The only thing I'll ask for is just give me, and this might be a tough ask, just give me a drive to want to turn on the game. Like, odds are I'm going to turn the game on, but can you just please give me a little bit more excitement? Like, I don't want to feel the chore aspect of it. I just want to sit down and watch a game. That's all I'm asking for this. By the time we record next week. Big ask, I know, but that's what I'm asking for.
Maybe I thought you were going to do the Dave Bautista promo. Give me what I want! Give me what I want! I thought you were going to do it.
It's more like here than thumbs down. That's what it's basically been, if we're going to talk about that.
Shay saying, do it for Ibby, please. Shay saying on the way out. By the way, John, nice new bat. Thank you very much. I don't have kids, so I can spend my money on whatever I want.
Must be nice.
It's pretty cool. It's not bad. Shay saying, hit the like button on the way out. Please do that. Aunt Rivera.
Hit the like, please.
Saying Carton and Roberts have nothing on Sap and Ibby. We appreciate that. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. If you missed any of the show, you want to go back as soon as we're done here in a few moments. You can watch the entire episode on our YouTube channel where it lives forever. It's appropriately called Till Mets Do Us Part. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Till Mets Do Us Part. And we understand that life is busy. Things get in the way. If you have no time to watch us and you'd rather listen to us, you can do that too. The episode will drop tomorrow morning as an audio show, wherever it is you get your podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, all of those places and more, courtesy of the Premier Podcast Network. I am now 3 for 3 on hitting that, even though it has changed. But you know what? I'm trying to be a professional about it. Thanks again to our guest, Carson from Mets Weekly, John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez. We will see you next week with more Till Mets Do Us Part. Peace and LFGM.